"Can I kiss you?" the billionaire asked, not knowing one kiss would change everything. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. Rain pounded against the windows of a quiet cafe in downtown Chicago. The storm outside matched the storm inside Maya Collins. She sat at a corner table, her backpack heavy with overdue bills, her mother's prescriptions, and the sinking weight of debt she could no longer outrun. At 24, she had already learned that life was relentless, and tonight it felt like it was closing in on her from every side. Her fingers fidgeted with the fraying strap of her bag when a deep, measured voice cut through the low hum of the cafe. "Maya Collins?" She looked up. Standing before her was Adrian Hale, the billionaire CEO, whose name alone could silence a room. His charcoal suit was crisp, his expression unreadable, and his dark eyes fixed on her as though she was the only person in the storm-lit cafe. "Yes?" Maya's voice was a whisper, barely audible over the rain. Adrian slid into the seat across from her with the confidence of a man who owned not just this cafe, but the city itself. He placed a sleek leather folder on the table, the kind of folder that never contained anything simple. "I will not waste your time," Adrian said evenly. "I am offering you a deal." Maya blinked, confused. "A deal?" "Yes." He opened the folder and turned it toward her. Inside was a neatly typed contract, the black ink sharp against the white pages. At the top, bold letters. "Marriage agreement." Maya's breath caught in her throat. "Marriage? Agreement? I do not understand." Adrian's gaze never wavered. "Marry me. Think of it as a contract. You will play the role of my wife in public. In return, every debt you carry will disappear. Your mother's medical bills will be paid in full. Your life will no longer be dictated by desperation." Her chest tightened as she tried to process his words. "Why me? You do not even know me." "Oh?" Adrian leaned back, his tone cool, almost calculated. "Because you are unattached, because you are desperate enough to consider it, and because I do not need love, Maya. I need a partner who will not complicate my life. This arrangement gives us both what we need." Maya stared down at the contract, her reflection staring back from the glossy table. Her father's debts had crushed them after he passed. Her mother's health was failing. Every day felt like drowning, and here was a lifeline except it was tied to a man she barely knew. "This is insane," she whispered, pushing the folder back toward him. Adrian's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. "Perhaps. But it is also an opportunity. You have until tomorrow to decide. After that, the offer is gone." He rose smoothly, buttoned his suit jacket, and left her sitting in the storm's glow, with nothing but the echo of his words and the contract burning in her memory. Maya pressed her palms against her temples. Was this her salvation or her undoing? Outside, lightning split the night sky. Inside, a young woman sat in silence, unaware that one reckless decision, signing her name on that contract, would set her on a collision course with a kiss that would change her life forever. Rain still drummed against the windows of the cafe long after Adrian Hale had disappeared into the night. The folder sat on the table like a weight, pressing on Maya Collins's chest. She closed it, slid it into her backpack, and hurried home through the storm. The streets of Chicago were slick, the air biting against her thin jacket. Each step echoed with the words he had left behind. "Marry me. Think of it as a contract." By the time she reached the small apartment she shared with her mother, she was soaked through. The hallway light flickered weakly as she pushed open the door. Inside, the place was cramped, the wallpaper peeling, the air heavy with the scent of boiled rice and medicine. Her mother sat propped against a stack of pillows on the couch, a blanket pulled up to her chin, her breathing shallow. "You are late," her mother whispered, offering a tired smile. Maya forced one in return. "I stayed at the cafe to finish some work." She set her bag down, hiding the folder beneath her jacket before her mother could see. The truth was harder to hide. The rent notice was taped to the door, red letters screaming at her the moment she walked in. They were 3 months behind. Her mother's prescriptions had already been cut in half to stretch the supply. The landlord had warned her just yesterday that he had another tenant ready to take the place if she could not pay by Friday. Maya busied herself making tea, her hands trembling as she measured out the last of the sugar. She thought about her shifts at the diner, about the 12-hour days that barely covered groceries. Every extra dollar she earned went straight into her mother's medicine. There was never enough left for herself, never enough to climb out of the hole her father's debts had dug when he passed away. She carried the tea to her mother and tucked the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Drink this. It will help." Her mother reached for her hand. "You look so tired, Maya. You work too hard." "Auntie." "I am fine," Maya said, forcing steadiness into her voice. But her eyes burned as she looked at her mother's frail frame. Fine was the last thing she was. Later that night, when her mother finally drifted to sleep, Maya pulled the folder from her bag. She sat at the kitchen table, the single overhead bulb buzzing faintly above her. Her eyes traced the words again. Marriage agreement. Her stomach turned. The idea was outrageous. Marry a man she barely knew. A billionaire who treated the proposal like a business transaction. It felt wrong, insulting, dangerous. Yet her mind could not escape the truth. One signature could wipe away every bill, every debt, every sleepless night. She looked at the stack of overdue notices on the counter, at the pill bottles with their dwindling contents, at the eviction warning that threatened to take away the only home they had left. Maya dropped her head into her hands. "What am I supposed to do?" She whispered into the empty room. The storm outside raged on, lightning flashing across the sky as though the city itself was listening. Somewhere in the silence, the memory of Adrian's voice echoed. "This arrangement gives us both what we need." Maya closed her eyes. Her pride told her to throw the contract away, but the gnawing ache of desperation whispered something else. Maybe she had no choice. Maybe tomorrow, she would walk back into that cafe, face Adrian Hale, and sign her name. Because if she did not, she would lose everything. The following morning, gray clouds still clung to the Chicago sky. Maya Collins barely slept. She rose from the couch before dawn, her head heavy with the weight of the contract that lay on the kitchen table. She stared at the papers once more, the bold letters marriage agreement daring her to make a choice. Her mother stirred in the next room, coughing softly, reminding Maya of the one reason she could not walk away. By the time the clock struck 9, she was already at the cafe again. Her hair was damp from the drizzle, her coat buttoned tightly against the cold. Adrian Hale was there, waiting. Seated by the window with his phone in hand. He looked exactly as he had the night before, immaculate, controlled, a man who never lost a game. "You came back," Adrian said simply, sliding his phone aside. Maya sat opposite him, her hands twisting in her lap. "I read the contract, and—" His eyes were steady, searching. She hesitated, her throat dry. "It is insane, I should walk away." "But you will not," Adrian replied smoothly, his voice a quiet blade. "You cannot afford to." Maya looked down, shame burning her cheeks. "You do not know me." "I know enough," Adrian said, pushing the folder toward her again. "You need help. I need someone willing to play a part. This is a transaction, nothing more." Her fingers hovered above the pen that rested inside the folder. The words blurred for a moment as her mind raced. Rules and conditions filled the pages. Asterisk appear as his wife at 5 events each month. Asterisk. Maintain the image of a committed marriage in public. Keep all details confidential. Asterisk. No real relationship beyond what the public saw. And then one line in bold ink. No intimacy unless publicly necessary to maintain appearances. Maya's chest tightened at those words. It felt cold, mechanical, yet somehow more dangerous because of it. Adrian's gaze narrowed slightly. "You may add your own terms. If there is something you cannot accept, state it now." Maya steadied her breath. "I want my mother's care guaranteed. Full coverage, no delays." "Done," Adrian said without hesitation. "It will be handled immediately." "Lun." Her pulse hammered in her ears. She signed her name at the bottom of the page, her handwriting shaking but final. Adrian's expression barely shifted, but for the first time, a shadow of something softer flickered in his eyes. He closed the folder, placed it in his briefcase, and extended his hand. Then it is settled, Mrs. Hale. The title struck her like a wave, heavier than she had expected. She shook his hand, the warmth of his skin clashing with the coldness of the arrangement. From that moment, her world shifted. A sleek black car waited outside the cafe, its driver opening the door without a word. Maya had never ridden in such luxury. The leather seats smelled of wealth, of power, of a life that was not hers. Adrian sat beside her, focused on his phone again, as though sealing a marriage contract was no more significant than closing a business deal. They drove through streets she barely recognized, past glittering towers of glass and steel. Finally, they stopped in front of a towering building, Hale Tower, Adrian's empire. "From now on, this is where you live," he said as they entered the private elevator. The mirrored walls reflected Maya's wide eyes, her second-hand coat a stark contrast against his tailored suit. When the doors opened, her breath caught. The penthouse stretched out before her floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline, marble floors gleaming beneath crystal chandeliers. Silence so heavy it felt like another person in the room. Maya clutched the strap of her bag. "This is not my world." Adrian glanced at her briefly. "It is now." She stepped inside, her shoes echoing against the polished floor. Every corner spoke of wealth, but none of warmth. She realized then that she was not just stepping into a marriage contract. She was stepping into Adrian Hale's fortress, a place as cold and guarded as the man himself. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet thought surfaced: this contract was the beginning of something far more complicated than either of them had written on paper. The first night in Hale Tower felt like stepping into another universe. Maya Collins set her small duffel bag on the polished floor of a guest room that looked larger than her entire apartment. The bed was draped in crisp white linens, the curtains heavy velvet, the window offering a sweeping view of the Chicago skyline. Yet despite the grandeur, the room felt cold, untouched, as if no one had ever lived here. Adrian Hale had disappeared into his study the moment they arrived. A housekeeper, silent and efficient, showed Maya where everything was. Dinner was served promptly at 7 in the cavernous dining room. Maya sat at one end of the long mahogany table, Adrian at the other. Between them stretched silver candelabras, china plates, and enough distance to make conversation almost impossible. She poked at her salmon with her fork. The food was flawless, but she had no appetite. Finally, she cleared her throat. "So, what happens now?" Adrian glanced up from cutting his steak, his expression unreadable. "Now you learn how to be Mrs. Hale. We have a gala tomorrow evening. You will attend as my wife." Maya's fork clattered softly against the plate. "Tomorrow? Already?" "Yes," Adrian said simply, taking another bite. "Appearances matter. The sooner the world sees us together, the stronger the story will hold." Her chest tightened. She had imagined some time to adjust, to find her footing, but Adrian treated it like another deadline to be met. The following morning, the transformation began. A stylist arrived, followed by a woman with racks of gowns and heels that gleamed under the penthouse lights. Maya stood awkwardly as measurements were taken, fabrics draped against her skin, jewelry clasped around her neck. "You have good bone structure," the stylist murmured. "We can work with this." Maya flushed at the bluntness, gripping the strap of her camisole as if it might anchor her. She caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror, messy hair, pale from exhaustion, eyes shadowed by worry. She barely recognized the girl staring back. Hours later, when the team was finished, Maya stepped into the living room in a navy evening gown that shimmered like liquid under the lights. Her hair was styled in soft waves, her makeup elegant but understated. For a moment, she felt like an actress playing a role she had never auditioned for. Adrian emerged from his study, already in a tailored black tuxedo. He stopped, his gaze flicking over her briefly before settling back into composure. "Acceptable," he said. Her cheeks burned. "That is all you have to say?" He adjusted his cufflinks, ignoring the edge in her voice. "This is not about compliments, Maya. It is about credibility. You look the part. That is what matters." The car ride to the gala was silent except for the hum of the engine. Maya's palms were damp against the silk clutch she held. Adrian sat beside her, scrolling through messages on his phone, as if nothing about the evening was extraordinary. To him, perhaps it was not. But to her, It felt like stepping onto a stage in front of an audience, waiting to see her fail. The hotel ballroom glowed with chandeliers, the air filled with laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses. The moment they entered, cameras flashed, voices hushed, and then the whispers began. "Who is she? Is that Adrian Hale's wife? She looks so young. Where did he find her?" Maya forced her shoulders back, trying to steady her breath. Adrian's hand rested lightly against her lower back, guiding her forward. To the crowd, the gesture looked tender. To her, it felt like a reminder. "Play the part." Reporters circled like hawks. One of them thrust a microphone forward. "Mr. Hale, congratulations. How long have you two been together?" Maya froze. She had not prepared for this. But Adrian's voice was smooth, controlled. "Long enough to know she is the only woman I want by my side." The crowd murmured approvingly. Cameras flashed again. Another reporter turned to Maya. "Mrs. Hale, what is it like being married to one of the most powerful men in the city?" Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to smile. "It is different," she said honestly. "But power is not what matters. What matters is the person behind it." The room quieted for a beat. Her answer was unpolished, but genuine. Adrian's jaw shifted slightly, as if her words had surprised him. Later that night, after hours of polite smiles and stiff conversations, Maya stepped out onto the balcony for air. The city glittered below, endless and intimidating. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering in the night breeze. Behind her, footsteps. Adrian's voice, lower now. "You handled yourself well." She turned, startled. "I thought you did not care about compliments." For a moment, his expression softened, the sharp edges fading. "Sometimes. Words are earned." "Oh." They stood in silence, the distance between them smaller now than at the long dinner table. The night pressed close. And for the first time, Maya felt a flicker of something dangerous, something no contract could control. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the penthouse, turning the marble floors into mirrors of gold. Maya Collins sat at the edge of the enormous bed in her guest room, still in disbelief over the night before. The gown had been returned, the jewelry locked away, but the memory of flashing cameras and whispered questions clung to her like perfume that refused to fade. She replayed the balcony moment in her mind, Adrian Hale's words, his tone less like a CEO and more like a man letting down a guard he never lowered. She shook the thought away. This was not real. It could not be. It was a contract, nothing more. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from her landlord. "Maya, someone else is ready to take the apartment. If you cannot pay this week, I have no choice." Her stomach twisted. At least she could now respond with relief. She texted back, "Please do not worry. The balance will be cleared today." For the first time in months, she could say that and mean it. Later that afternoon, Adrian's assistant, a poised woman named Claire, arrived at the penthouse. She carried a thick binder and greeted Maya with a polite but guarded smile. "Mr. Hale asked me to help you prepare for the next round of appearances. He believes consistency is crucial." Maya sat across from her at the glass dining table, flipping through the pages. Each section outlined etiquette rules, philanthropic events, names of board members, even family histories of the Hale inner circle. It felt like studying for an exam she had never signed up for. Claire's voice was calm but firm. "You will be tested in public. They want to see if you belong. If you stumble, they will call you an opportunist. Mr. Hale has made his choice, but the world is waiting for you to fail." The words stung, but Maya nodded, determined. "Then I will not fail." The following week was a blur. Adrian took her to a charity auction, where she fumbled with the bidding paddle but made the crowd laugh with her honesty. He escorted her to a board dinner, where she mispronounced the name of a French vineyard, but won over the table by admitting she had never tasted wine that did not come in a box. Each mistake should have embarrassed him. Instead, Adrian found himself watching her with a strange fascination. One evening, after a long dinner with investors, they returned to the penthouse. Maya slipped off her heels with a groan, her toes aching. "I do not know how women do this every day," she muttered. Adrian looked at her, his tie loosened, his expression unreadable. "You are not like them. That is why they notice you." She laughed softly. "Noticing is one thing. Accepting is another." Silence stretched between them. heavy but not uncomfortable. He stepped closer, just enough for her to feel the heat of his presence. His eyes searched hers, darker than the night sky beyond the glass windows. "Can I ask you something?" he said quietly. Her breath caught. "What? Can I kiss you?" The question startled her more than the flashing cameras ever had. Her heart pounded in her ears, her throat dry. She should have said no. She should have reminded him of the contract. The bold line that stated intimacy was not required. But her lips parted, and no refusal came. Adrian leaned in slowly, as if giving her every chance to turn away. She did not. Their lips met in a kiss that was meant to be simple, perhaps staged if anyone had been watching, but no one was there. No cameras, no investors, no contract. Just the two of them in a quiet penthouse high above the city. It was brief, a brush of warmth and electricity, but when he pulled back, the air between them was different. Maya pressed a trembling hand against her chest, struggling to steady her breath. "That was not in the agreement," she whispered. Adrian's eyes lingered on her, his voice low. "No, it was not." Neither of them said more, but in the silence that followed, they both knew something had shifted. The lines of the contract were blurring, and a single kiss had drawn them into a dangerous territory where feelings could no longer be denied, no matter what the papers said. That night, long after the kiss had ended, Maya Collins lay awake in the vast bed of the guest room. She stared at the ceiling, her mind replaying the moment again and again. Adrian Hale's lips had been warm, steady, deliberate. It was not the kiss of a man who treated her like a contract. It was the kiss of someone who, for one fleeting moment, had allowed himself to feel. She pressed her hands to her face. "This is dangerous," she whispered to the silence. But even as she said it, her heart raced with something she could not deny. The following days unfolded like a blur. Adrian grew quieter, more distant, yet she caught him watching her when he thought she was not looking. Their routine shifted in subtle ways. He waited for her at the car before events. He pulled out her chair at dinners. He lingered when she laughed. None of it was written in the agreement, but it happened all the same. One evening, after another exhausting gala, Maya found herself alone with him on the penthouse balcony. The city lights glimmered below like constellations. She leaned against the railing, arms wrapped around herself. "You do not have to keep doing this," she said softly, staring at the skyline. "The pretending, the hand at my back, the smiles that are not real." Adrian stood beside her, his hands tucked in his pockets. His voice was quieter than she had ever heard it. "What if they are real?" She turned, startled. The question hung in the cool night air. Adrian exhaled, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I built walls because everyone wanted something from me. Money, influence, access. My world is full of masks, of people who play roles. But when you speak, Maya, you are not performing. You are just you. And I find myself not wanting you to leave." Maya's throat tightened. She had expected indifference, not vulnerability. "Adrian?" He faced her now, and in his eyes she saw not the billionaire who owned half the city, but a man who carried loneliness like a second skin. "I do not know what this is becoming, but I know that one kiss was not enough." Her breath caught, the city spinning around her. She wanted to protest, to remind him of the rules. But the truth was, she felt it too, the shift, the pull, the slow unraveling of everything she thought she could control. That night, she returned to her room shaken. She opened her sketchbook, the only piece of her old life she had brought into this tower of glass and steel. On the page, she began to draw. The curve of a city skyline, a man in a tuxedo, a girl with her heart in her hands. She drew until tears blurred the lines. The next morning, Adrian surprised her. Instead of another gala or dinner, he told her to dress simply. The driver took them to a quiet park at the edge of the city. No photographers followed, no investors waited. Just trees swaying in the breeze, and a pond reflecting the pale Sunday. Maya frowned as they walked. "Why bring me here?" Adrian glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Because this is where my mother used to take me, before she passed. It is the only place that ever felt safe." Maya slowed, touched by the confession. She watched as his usually rigid posture softened, as he breathed easier under the open sky. He was showing her a piece of himself no one else had seen. They sat on a bench near the pond, silence stretching comfortably. For the first time since signing the contract, Maya felt less like a pawn and more like a partner. She turned to him. "You are not as untouchable as you pretend to be." Adrian gave a faint smile. "And you are not as ordinary as you believe." The air grew still, charged with the weight of unspoken words. He reached for her hand, and she let him. The touch was steady, grounding, and frightening all at once. Maya knew then that the boundaries of their arrangement had shattered. This was no longer just about survival or appearances. This was something real. Something that could no longer be hidden behind contracts or cameras. And though fear twisted in her stomach, she also felt hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, the kiss that started it all was leading them towards something far greater than either of them had dared imagine. The fragile balance between duty and desire did not last long. Just 1 week after that quiet afternoon in the park, Maya Collins found herself at the center of a storm she never saw coming. The morning began with a knock on the penthouse door. Claire, Adrian's assistant, entered carrying a glossy magazine. Her expression was tight, her lips pressed thin. She laid the magazine on the dining table without a word. Across the cover blared a headline in bold letters. "The Contract Bride? Sources claim Adrian Hale's marriage is a business arrangement." Maya's heart dropped. Photographs from the gala filled the pages, accompanied by anonymous quotes. She came out of nowhere. No one knows her background. It is all a scheme. The article painted her as nothing more than a gold digger who had manipulated Adrian into marriage. Adrian read in silence, his jaw clenched. When he finally looked at her, his eyes were sharp, guarded. "Do you know who leaked this?" Maya shook her head quickly. "No. I swear I do not." But the damage was done. Within hours, social media was buzzing with accusations. Investors were calling for explanations, and reporters camped outside the building. What had once been whispers at parties had now become headlines. By evening, the situation worsened. Adrian's ex, a glamorous socialite named Vanessa, appeared on a talk show, smirking as she hinted that Maya had trapped Adrian for money. "Adrian has always been smart," Vanessa purred to the camera. "But even the smartest men can be fooled by a pretty face." Maya felt her stomach twist as she watched the segment replayed on television. She turned to Adrian. "She is lying. You know that, right?" Adrian's silence cut deeper than words. For the first time since signing the contract, Maya felt the full weight of her choice. The same city that once applauded her at galas now tore her apart. And Adrian, the man who had kissed her as though he meant it, seemed to retreat behind the same walls she thought she had broken. That night, alone in her room, Maya pressed her face into her hands. She had signed the agreement to save her mother, never imagining it would destroy her dignity. Now the world saw her as nothing but a fraud, and Adrian's distance made it hurt all the more. She whispered into the darkness, "Maybe this was all a mistake." What she did not know was that downstairs, Adrian sat in his study, staring at the same magazine. His fist tightened around it until the paper crumpled. For the first time in years, he was not angry at the world. He was angry at himself for letting someone close enough to be hurt. And yet, deep down, he knew the story was not over. The contract might have brought them together, but what had grown between them was no longer something that could be erased by a headline. The scandal refused to fade. By the end of the week, Adrian Hale was summoned to a high-stakes board meeting. The directors demanded answers, their voices sharp, their doubts heavier than the polished oak table that separated them. Investors wanted assurance that Adrian's judgment had not faltered. Rumors about a contract bride threatened not only his reputation but also the stability of his company's future. Maya Collins stood outside the glass doors, her palms cold, her heart pounding. Claire had warned her to stay away, but she could not. She had to hear what Adrian would say when the world questioned everything. Inside, a director's voice cut through the tension. "Mr. Hale, we cannot ignore these allegations. Did you marry this woman under contract?" Adrian rose slowly, every eye fixed on him. He could have denied it. He could have hidden behind polished words or legal clauses. Instead, he looked each board member in the eye and said, "Yes, it began as an arrangement. I asked Maya Collins to be my wife for appearances. That much is true." A ripple of shock spread around the table. Outside, Maya gasped, her throat tightening. "But, Adrian continued, his voice firm now. What no one here understands is that an agreement cannot explain what happened after. I underestimated her. I thought she was simply playing a role, but she is not. She has stood beside me when others doubted, spoken honestly when others lied, and reminded me what integrity looks like. This is no longer a contract. This is my choice. One director leaned forward. So you are telling us that you are in love with her? Adrian did not hesitate. Yes, I love her. And if that costs me votes in this room, so be it. Gasps filled the boardroom. Outside the doors, Maya's knees nearly buckled. She pressed a hand against her mouth, tears blurring her vision. Adrian was not finished. From his briefcase, he pulled out a set of documents. I am transferring 5% of my shares to Maya Collins, effective immediately. If anyone here believes she is only after money, let this prove otherwise. Because she never asked for this, I am the one laying everything on the line. The room erupted in murmurs, some in disbelief, others in reluctant respect. Adrian's voice cut through once more, steady and unyielding. This company has thrived because I have always acted with clarity. Today I am clearer than ever. Maya is my wife, not by contract, but by choice. Through the glass, Maya's tears spilled freely. For the first time she believed his words. The kiss that had unsettled her world was not a mistake. It was the beginning of something real. When Adrian stepped out of the boardroom, he found her waiting, eyes shining with emotion. Neither spoke at first. Then, in a whisper that trembled but carried all the truth she had, Maya said, "You did not have to do that." Adrian reached for her hand, his expression softer than she had ever seen. "Yes, I did." And in that moment, she knew the walls between them had finally fallen. A month after the boardroom confrontation, the city of Chicago was buzzing with a different kind of headline. No longer about a contract marriage, no longer whispers of scandal, but stories of a billionaire who had publicly chosen love over pride, and a young woman who had stood steady through the storm. Maya Collins stood in the center of an art gallery that Adrian Hale had quietly arranged behind the scenes. The walls were lined with her sketches, pieces she had drawn in the stolen hours of exhaustion, moments when she thought her dreams would never matter. Tonight, they hung beneath soft lights, admired by guests who spoke her name with genuine respect. She touched one frame gently, her voice trembling. "You did this?" Adrian stood beside her, his tuxedo sharp, but his expression unguarded. "I promised myself that when the world saw us again, it would be on your terms, not mine. You once told me art was the only way you could breathe. Now everyone will see what I already know, that you are extraordinary." Tears welled in Maya's eyes. For so long she had carried shame, the label of opportunist, the burden of survival. But tonight, the weight lifted. She was not simply Mrs. Hale. She was herself again. As the evening drew to a close, Adrian led her to the center of the gallery. The guests hushed as he turned to her, a small velvet box in his hand. "The first time I asked you to marry me, I offered you a contract. Tonight, I am asking you again, but not as a businessman, as a man who loves you." He opened the box, revealing a ring that gleamed beneath the lights. "Maya Collins, will you marry me not for appearances, not for obligation, but for forever?" Her hands trembled as she covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. The memory of that first cold folder, the lifeless ink of the marriage agreement, felt a lifetime away. She had entered this world as a desperate girl clutching debt notices. Now she stood as a woman chosen, cherished, and free. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Yes, Adrian." The crowd erupted in applause. Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger, then kissed her with a tenderness that silenced the room. It was not a kiss for show, not a kiss bound by rules. It was the kiss that had once blurred the lines of a contract, now sealing a promise that could never be broken. Weeks later, they were married in a quiet ceremony, attended by only family and a handful of close friends. There were no flashing cameras, no staged photographs, just vows spoken in earnest, hands held tightly, and a promise to choose each other every day. As Maya looked into Adrian's eyes, she thought of the question that had started it all. "Can I kiss you?" She smiled through tears, knowing the answer had changed her life forever. And so, what began as a cold arrangement ended as the greatest mistake they ever made. The kind of mistake that led to love, to truth, and to a future neither of them had dared to dream.